Welcome back to Milan. It's great to see you again. We're so glad you're joining us for another walk through this incredible city, where surprises wait around every corner. In this episode, we'll take you beyond the typical tourist spots and into some of Milan's lesser-known corners, places full of history, soul, and quiet stories. We'll start in a space made for children's imagination, and from there, step by step, we'll explore buildings that have seen emperors, saints, and noble intrigue. It's a route that blends light-hearted discovery with meaningful depth, perfect for a free afternoon and a map in hand. If you enjoy this way of discovering the city, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the next episodes. Check out the description below for a link to our website, where you'll find an interactive map of this walk and others we've created, along with extra insights, opening hours for the sites, and a gallery of photos from each stop. Ready? Let's go explore the places people talk about all the time, and the ones almost no one mentions. This is our second walk in the Strolling Through Milan series, and it's called Hidden Treasures of the City. We begin our walk in a place that today bursts with laughter, color, and children's imagination. But 3 centuries ago, it looked and felt very different. This is the Rotonda della Besana, an extraordinary, almost theatrical complex of Baroque buildings surrounding a garden courtyard. What you see today took shape in the early 18th century, when Milan's great hospital, Ospedale Maggiore, expanded. But this wasn't part of the medical facilities. It was a cemetery. Yes, this peaceful garden with its elegant colonnade once served as a burial ground for the hospital's deceased patients. Over its long history, nearly 150,000 people were laid to rest here. At its center stood the Church of San Michele, a round chapel enclosed by a perfectly symmetrical cloister. This entire space was designed for mourning and reflection. It's a striking example of Lombard Baroque, where even death had its place, orderly, serene, and aesthetically considerate. After 1792, Austrian reforms required cemeteries to be relocated outside city limits. The site was abandoned, and in 1807, during Napoleon's reign, architect Luigi Canola proposed converting the Rotonda into a national pantheon for the Kingdom of Italy, with Milan as its capital. But the idea collapsed along with Napoleon's empire, and the Austrians returned. Over the next century, the buildings fell into neglect. At various times, they were used as army barracks, stables, a hospital laundry, and storage facilities. It wasn't until the late 20th century that the city of Milan purchased the complex and began a full restoration. Between 2000 and 2010, the cloisters and gardens were carefully renovated, and the former church, officially deconsecrated, was reimagined as a space for creativity, workshops, and exhibitions. This is how MUBA was born, Milan's Children's Museum. And while today the Rotonda is filled with joy, play and energy, its walls remember far more: sorrow and loss, political ambition, years of abandonment, and a long journey back to life. Just a few minutes from the elegant Rotonda, you stepped into a completely different world. Massive, stark, and unapologetically imposing. In front of you stands the Milan courthouse, one of the largest judicial buildings in Italy. Its light stone facade, rhythmic rows of columns, and enormous heavy doors bring to mind ancient temples, and that's no accident. The building was constructed between 1932 and 1940, during Mussolini's rule. Designed by architect Marcello Piacentini, it blends classical elements with the modern monumentality, typical of fascist architecture. The style was meant to project the power of the state, order, discipline, and the authority of the law, not just over individuals, but as a symbol of national unity. Inside you'll find dozens of courtrooms, grand staircases, mosaics, and symbolic sculptures. But the real significance lies in what you can't see. This is where some of Italy's most pivotal post-war trials took place, cases involving the mafia, politics, and finance. It's a space where the Italian state, whether strong or fragile, honest or corrupt, was reflected like a mirror. Compared to Milan's historic landmarks, the courthouse might feel too modern or too heavy. But it's still a part of the city's story, one that's newer, more complex, and not always comfortable. That's why it's worth pausing here, even briefly, to realize that every era leaves its mark not only in museums, but also in the everyday buildings we walk past. On the way to our next stop, let's pause for a moment at Piazza Medaglie d'Oro. Here we'll see the monument to the Bersaglieri, a powerful work by sculptor Mario Robauti, unveiled in 1973. The monument is strikingly modern in design and rich in symbolism. At its center stands a massive wall of reinforced concrete, split by a jagged irregular crack, like a wound torn open. From this deep rupture emerge stylized figures of Bersaglieri, suspended in the air, long, slender, and almost weightless. The Bersaglieri are an elite Italian light infantry unit, founded in the 19th century, known for their speed, bravery, and distinctive hats adorned with feathers. In the sculpture, those feathered hats are the only detail that reveals who these ghost-like figures truly are. On one side, 3 soldiers, on the other, a larger group. And at the base of the wall, a quiet presence, women and children, still and watchful. It's a monument that speaks without words of sacrifice, memory, and those left behind. And just a short walk from here, the city's voice grows even quieter. Here, tucked away in a quiet corner of the city, is one of Milan's most haunting and unforgettable places, the sanctuary of San Bernardino All'Ossa, home to its famous ossuary chapel. The story begins in the 13th century, when the nearby hospital of San Barnaba in Brolo ran out of burial space. At first, the dead were buried in crypts underground, but when those filled up, their bones were moved into a separate chapel. That space became the ossuary, original a practical solution, but over time, something much more meaningful. In 1269, a church was built next to it, San Bernardino All'Ossa, named after the bones inside. After a fire in the 18th century, the chapel was rebuilt in a theatrical Baroque style. It was rededicated to Saint Bernardino of Siena, and the bones were arranged in decorative symmetrical patterns, not to frighten, but to inspire reflection. In a world that often turns away from death, this place gently asks us to look closer. It's not a chamber of horrors, it's a meditation on mortality, a quiet prayer for the soul. Because behind every skull there was a name, a life, a story. Just next door is another powerful space, the Basilica of Stefano Maggiore. It's one of the oldest churches in Milan, with origins dating back to the 5th century. The original church was built on what's known as the Stone of the Innocents, a site that, according to tradition, once held the relics of early Christian martyrs from the time of Emperor Valentinian. That symbolic stone still exists today and can be seen in a small chamber beneath the floor, marked by a plaque in the main nave. The church was originally dedicated to Saint Zacharias, and since the 10th century, it has borne the name of Saint Stephen. The building has changed over time, from Romanesque foundations to Baroque ceilings. And today you can see pieces of every era woven into its walls. The massive facade opens into a vast light-filled interior. But don't be fooled, this space has seen its share of darkness. On Christmas Day, 1476, Galeazzo Maria Sforza, Duke of Milan, was assassinated here during morning mass. Blood and betrayal beneath the vaulted ceiling, a symbol of Renaissance power and intrigue. And nearly a century later, in this very church, a baby was baptized. September 30th, 1571. His name, Michelangelo Merisi. The world would know him as Caravaggio, a master of light and shadow, born in a place full of both. Santo Stefano may not make the front pages of most travel guides, but it's still very much alive, a church for locals, for daily life, for quiet moments. We now head toward the lively Piazza San Babila, where history meets the pace of modern city life. Here stands one of Milan's oldest churches, San Babila, built in the late 11th century. It rose on the site of a much older oratory, said to be the city's first Christian building. Legend links it to the apostle Barnabas, who symbolically brought the faith to Lombardy. In the Middle Ages, San Babila ranked third in importance, after the Duomo and Basilica of Saint Ambrose. It was dedicated to Saint Babylas of Antioch, a 3rd century martyr venerated mostly in the East. This reflects Milan's deep historic ties with early Eastern Christianity. The church has changed many times over the centuries and today features a neo-Romanesque look. Some Romanesque details have survived, like a few sculpted capitals inside. For generations, this was the patricians' church, a place of prestige for Milan's elite. Out on the square stands the Column of the Lion, a stone monument with a mysterious past. Some say it came from spoils of war against Venice and dates back to the time of the Visconti. Today this weathered lion stands guard, a silent symbol of the neighborhood's long memory. Walking from San Babila toward our next stops, we pass the impressive building of the University of Milan. Today it houses a major public university, but its history dates back to the 15th century, when the Ospedale Maggiore was built here, also known as Ca' Granda or the Big House. It was one of the first truly modern hospitals in Europe, organized into departments with dedicated spaces for learning and practicing medicine. Designed by Filarete, an architect at the Sforza court, it embodied the Renaissance ideals: beauty guided by purpose, form shaped by function. After World War II, the heavily damaged building was rebuilt and given new life as a university. Today its courtyards and cloisters are alive with student energy, though the walls still remember centuries of care, learning, and civic history. A little further on, we come across another of Milan's oldest churches, Sant'Eufemia. Its origins go back to the 5th century, though the current facade with its warm terracotta and Vincenza stone was added in a 19th century restoration. From the outside, the church catches the eye with quiet elegance, but it's the interior that truly captivates. Its walls and ceilings are covered in glowing mosaics, reminiscent of Ravenna's famed Mausoleum of Galla Placidia, full of light, gold, and delicate Eastern contrasts. And few people know that Sant'Eufemia is also known for its outstanding acoustics. So much so that in the 1950s, none other than Maria Callas chose to record her operatic parts here. The church is only open for a few hours each day, so you might not always catch a glimpse inside. But even standing in the vestibule, you can sense the place's atmosphere and admire its refined detail. We keep walking, letting Milan keep surprising us. This time we arrive at one of the city's most iconic spots, the Colonne di San Lorenzo. Here stands a row of towering marble columns, each over 36 feet high. They date back to the 2nd or 3rd century AD, and were likely part of Roman baths or pagan temple. As Christianity grew, old Roman buildings were often repurposed. In the 4th century, these columns were moved here to create a grand entrance to a brand new basilica. And somehow they've survived everything since: the fall of the empire, earthquakes, wars, and centuries of rebuilding. In the Middle Ages and Renaissance, the square was Milan's public forum, a place for announcements, gatherings, and trade. But there's also a darker side. This was once a site for executions, and during the plague, a landmark for carts collecting the dead. Today, it's a lively meeting spot, especially in the evenings, when the area fills with locals and visitors. In front of the columns stands a statue of Emperor Constantine, a key figure in Christian history. It was Constantine who, through the Edict of Milan in 313, made Christianity legal in the Roman Empire. And just behind the columns, another gem awaits, the Basilica of San Lorenzo Maggiore. This is one of Milan's oldest and most unusual churches. It dates back to the 4th century, when Christianity was just beginning to shape the city's identity. Instead of the traditional basilica layout, San Lorenzo was built with a central plan. The space radiates outwards from the center. This style, inspired by Roman baths and imperial mausoleums, was meant to reflect divine harmony. It's striking to realize that this kind of layout became standard in Renaissance churches, and yet here it is, almost 1,000 years earlier. Step inside and you'll feel it. The massive columns, the open space, the quiet, glowing light. One part is especially moving, the Chapel of Saint Aquilina, with early Christian mosaics that shimmer in gold. The design feels almost Byzantine, yet we're standing in the heart of Lombardy. It's the kind of place that invites you to stop, look up, and just breathe. Over the centuries, the basilica was damaged and rebuilt many times, especially after fires. What we see today is the result of many changes, but its soul, that deep, ancient spirituality, has never left. Our walk continues along one of Milan's oldest streets, once part of the city's medieval heart. Along the way, we pass through two historic city gates. Starting with the first, Porta Ticinese. Built in the 12th century, this gate was part of the defensive walls that once encircled Milan. Its brick towers and pointed archway take us back to a time when the city defended its borders from invaders and collected tolls from merchants arriving from the direction of the Ticino River. In the 14th century, the gate was rebuilt under the powerful Visconti family, who expanded Milan's fortifications and turned it into one of the best protected cities in northern Italy. Their emblem, a serpent devouring a man, was displayed on many city gates, and perhaps even this one. Today, Porta Ticinese no longer guards the city, but its bold Gothic form still makes a strong impression, a silent witness to Milan's layered past. And now we keep moving. Hopefully you're not tired of churches just yet, because this next one is a real gem. We now arrive at the Basilica of Sant'Eustorgio, a church that for centuries drew pilgrims from all over Europe. It was here in the 4th century that the relics of the three wise men were brought from Constantinople by Saint Eustorgius, the Bishop of Milan at the time. It's believed that the basilica was built specifically to house these sacred relics. making it one of the very first pilgrimage destinations in Western Christianity. For centuries, the relics were venerated here until 1162, when Emperor Frederick Barbarossa's troops invaded Milan. Some of the relics were looted and taken to Cologne. It wasn't until 1903 that a portion of them returned to the city, thanks to the efforts of Cardinal Andrea Carlo Ferrari. Today, they are kept in a reliquary above the altar in the Chapel of the Magi. But there is much more to discover inside. The basilica also houses frescoes from the school of Giotto, monumental tombs of the Visconti family, one of the most powerful dynasties in Milan's history, and a true gem of the Renaissance, the Portinari Chapel. This stunning space was commissioned in the second half of the 15th century by Pietro Portinari, a Florentine banker connected to the Sforza court. Designed by the architect Michelozzo and decorated by Vincenzo Foppa, the chapel impresses with its harmonious proportions, natural light, and richly detailed frescoes depicting scenes from the life of Saint Peter Martyr. It remains one of the earliest and most important examples of Renaissance art in Lombardy. And don't miss the Basilica's bell tower, the tallest in all of Milan. Instead of a cross, it's topped with a symbolic star of the Magi, which for centuries has guided pilgrims on their journey to the sacred place. The Basilica of Sant'Eustorgio is more than a historic site. It's a place where the spirit of the past still lingers, a spirit of pilgrimage, faith, and a meeting point between the East and West. From the Basilica of Sant'Eustorgio, we continue along what was once a busy marching route. After just a few minutes of walking, we arrive at the second of Milan's two city gates, with the same name, Porta Ticinese Nuova. Built in the early 19th century on the site of an old bastion, this gate was part of the city's modern urban redesign during the Napoleonic era. Its neoclassical architecture, with a grand portico and four imposing columns, stands in sharp contrast to the Gothic austerity of the medieval Porta Ticinese we passed earlier. This newer gate was meant to represent a modern open Milan, welcoming travels arriving from the south. Just beyond Porta Ticinese Nuova, the city opens up onto the Darsena, Milan's old inland port. This was once the final stop for barges traveling along the Naviglio Grande, carrying goods from across Lombardy. For centuries, the Darsena was a hub of commercial life, alive with the scents of spices, the shouts of merchants, and the creaking ropes of moored boats. Though it fell into decline for a while, today the Darsena has been revitalized and is once again a favorite spot for strolling, socializing, and weekend relaxation. From here, we head toward one of Milan's most important churches, the Basilica of Saint Ambrose. But this isn't just a church, it's the spiritual heart of the city, named after its patron saint, a man who shaped not only Milan's identity, but the course of Western Christianity itself. Saint Ambrose was one of the most influential bishops in church history. Chosen unexpectedly while still a lay official, he quickly became a symbol of the Church's independence from secular power, boldly confronting emperors when needed. His sermons, hymns, and theological writings had a profound impact on the Christian world and deeply inspired Saint Augustine. It was he who in the 4th century ordered the construction of the basilica on the site of an ancient cemetery, dedicating it to Christian martyrs. After his death, he was buried here, alongside Saints Gervasius and Protasius. And though the basilica has been rebuilt and restored many times over the centuries, the spirit of its founder is still very much alive. The entrance leads through a stunning Romanesque courtyard, the atrium, surrounded by 11th century arcades. In early Christian times, this is where the faithful would gather in prayer before entering the church. It's a quiet space filled with light and harmony, where time seems to pause. From here, we step into the church itself, solemn and majestic, with raised galleries and cross vaults in Romanesque proportions. The basilica features a semicircular apse and smaller side chapels also rounded at the end of the aisles. It has no transept, which gives it a compact and balanced form. Interestingly, the dimensions of the interior exactly match those of the exterior portico, a sign of the building's symmetry and carefully considered design. At the center, your eye is drawn to a richly decorated golden altar from the 9th century, a masterpiece of Carolingian craftsmanship that gleams against the red brick and filtered light. Beneath it lies the crypt, where the relics of Saint Ambrose and the 2 martyrs rest, surrounded by candles and quiet prayer. This basilica is more than just a monument. It's a living story of what Milan once was at the dawn of Christian Europe. This is where Saint Augustine was baptized, where the Ambrosian liturgy was born, and where to this day Milanese still come to seek silence, meaning, and connection within the same walls that witnessed the city's spiritual beginnings. From the Basilica of Saint Ambrose, we head west through the quiet streets of the Magenta district. After a short walk, we arrived at a place whose name is known all over the world, Santa Maria delle Grazie. At first glance, it may seem like just another beautiful but modest red brick church. But its significance in the history of European art and culture is immense. This is where in the convent's former dining hall you'll find one of Leonardo da Vinci's most iconic masterpieces, The Last Supper. The church was built in the second half of the 15th century, at the initiative of the powerful Sforza family, as part of a Dominican monastery. Construction began in the Gothic style, likely based on a design by Guiniforte Solari. Around 1490, Duke Ludovico Sforza, known as Il Moro, commissioned the church's expansion by Donato Bramante, who would later go on to design St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Bramante is believed to have designed the church's apse, as his name appears inscribed in a piece of marble dating to 1494, embedded in the church vault. For Ludovico Sforza, this was more than just a place of worship. It was intended as a dynastic pantheon, a temple to celebrate the power and prestige of his rule. That ambition explains the monumental scale of the project and the presence of two of the most renowned artists of the era, Bramante and Leonardo. Today it's Leonardo's Last Supper that draws cultural pilgrims from around the globe to Santa Maria delle Grazie. Painted between 1495 and 1498, on the wall of the monastery's refectory, the fresco stands with its masterful use of perspective, gesture, and emotion. But it's also an extremely fragile work. Due to Leonardo's experimental technique, the painting began to deteriorate only decades after its completion. Fearing the loss of the original, Cardinal Federico Borromeo commissioned a faithful copy of the fresco in 1611. The artist was Andrea Bianchi, known as Vespino, who spent 5 years completing it. Today, his version is preserved in the Ambrosiana Gallery, with colors and details that are now barely visible in the original. It's a rare opportunity to see the Last Supper almost as it was first imagined. And if you are unable to reserve a ticket to visit the refectory, the Ambrosiana, which we explored on our very first walk, offers a beautiful and often overlooked alternative. Yet again, Milan reminds us that great art isn't always where you expect it. Sometimes it waits in quieter corners, ready to reveal itself to those who take the time to look closely. It's been a truly special walk, and we're so glad you share it with us. Today's journey let us uncover yet another side of Milan. Not the version you see in guidebooks or on glossy websites, but the Milan that speaks through its places, churches and walls, a city that continues to write its own story. Here, among churches, piazzas and ancient ruins, the lives of the Sforzas and the Viscontis intertwine, princes and rebels, patrons and traitors. This is where Caravaggio was baptized, and where Leonardo da Vinci painted his most iconic supper. This is where Christianity gained legitimacy, bringing about spiritual and social transformation that shaped not only Milan, but all of Europe. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope you'll subscribe and keep walking with us through other extraordinary places. Because every city has a story, every era its heroes, and every journey needs a narrator. See you next time!